Okay, let's get started on the left mandrel post construction. Here's our assembly diagram. First, we're going to put the shaft collar onto the shaft. Here's our stainless steel shaft. 12mm shaft collar. Okay, slide snugly on there. There are a handful of hex wrenches that are provided in the construction kit. The smallest one, the second to smallest one. So we're going to affix the mandrel shaft, the shaft collar at the end of the mandrel shaft with the set screw. So next thing we're going to do is put on the cloverleaf plate and the flathead screws with the mandrel chuck. So the cloverleaf plate on the back. Here is our chuck plate. Flathead screws, we'll need 4 of them. First one through, and we'll get it to slowly, just to easily thread into the cloverleaf plate. So notice that this is a press fit. I will need a Phillips screwdriver. Let me get that. So I'm loosely going to put in all 4. Notice that the hex screw on the shaft collar needs to be in a position so that it can be later tightened or loosened and not in the way of one of the flathead screws. That's number 2. This is number 3. And number 4. Okay, so what we've got now is the shaft collar with the hex screw exposed, the 4 flathead screws, and we're going to tighten it on down in succession. Not each bolt. I'm going to go around in a circle as I tighten and get all of the 4 flathead screws generally tight. Now I'll give it a little torque and tighten them all down. Okay, now we still have access to the hex screw in the shaft collar, which I will tighten just a little bit further. Okay, notice that I do not in this case have the shaft all the way through the chuck plate. That's okay. It should probably be flush there, but I think it'll work fine just like it is. Okay, so next let's start with the bearings and the mandrel post. So we have a handful of bronze bearings. We're going to need 2. They each go on each side of the left mandrel post. We're going to take our washers, and in this case, note there is a spacer called out for on the assembly diagram. Really what we need are 2 nylon washers. There's 1. And there's 2. So the nylon washers are in direct contact with the brass bearing. Okay. Our rear mandrel shaft gear, notice it has 2 hex screws, 12mm. Inner diameter, and another hex screw that hex key, the smallest one in this case. Just make sure that those are loosened and not in the way of the shaft. Let's put that down on the shaft. There may be a small burr or 2 if on the shaft itself, given the way that it was machined. And in fact, I think my hex screws are still a bit in the way, so let me back them out. Sorry, I had the wrong hex key there. Okay, so that should slide on. Now let's go ahead and tighten that up. I haven't torqued down on them yet. Now, I'm still a little loose. I probably should. I think that's okay. Now I'm going to tighten down on the shaft, on the hex screws in the rear mandrel shaft gear. Okay, that's the main mandrel. So let's put on the left mandrel post. We're going to give it a decorative top here, so I'm going to get 2 nylon thumb screws, put that in the top. Mostly just to cover the top of the left mandrel post. Mostly cosmetic, no real functional purpose. Okay, that's our left mandrel post. Let's put on the chuck slides. We've got a few of those. Each one of these comes individually bagged. I'm going to pull out 4 of them. Again, we're going to need 4 of the 1, 2, 3, 4 of the black nylon thumb screws. And notice that this slides into the slot, and then from the back side, the black nylon thumb screw, which will tighten that down, will slide in there. So let's put on all 4 of those. Okay, we've now put on all 4 of the chuck slides. Let's now move to the concealed end nuts, the concealed end fasteners. There are 15 or so individually packaged. We only need 2 at the moment. Now notice the end fastener, it's concealed. So let's just put this through, and then onto the bottom of the left mandrel post, we screw that right on in. Remember, we use our hex key. To bring that on in. Now the alignment of the concealed nut should be longitudinal with the end, or the lower end of the left mandrel post. Got to fidget with it just a bit. And the second one, the second concealed end fastener, should thread in also to the bottom of the left mandrel post. Now, let's actually, before we do that, this is a frequent, I need to put in the double end nut in the slot so we can affix the motor. Otherwise, the concealed end fastener would actually be blocking. So let's get a double, this is called a double T-nut. We'll slide that in. That will accept the left, the mandrel motor mount. Then I can put on the concealed end fastener. So now let's just talk briefly about how the left mandrel post attaches to the long bar. So here is my forward long bar, and notice the only machining that needs to be done on the forward long bar are 2 holes. These are 1/4 inch diameter that exactly match up with the concealed end fasteners on the bottom of the left mandrel post. Now, these concealed end fasteners will simply slide right in, and from the bottom now we have access with our hex key to tighten those nuts, which I'm doing here, and I'm tightening those concealed end fasteners on the bottom of the left mandrel post. And I'm going to clamp down. all of the concealed end fasteners, whether it's for the left carriage post, the left mandrel post, or any other post that form a 90-degree angle, the concealed end fasteners are done in this manner. You get a very rigid 90-degree formation. And so with our left mandrel post, we now have the double end nut. And at this point, I'm going to take our stepper motor and put on the motor mount plate. For that, I need the 5mm button head screws, and we have another included hex key exactly for those. So let's put on all 4 of the thumb head screws, the button head screws to secure the motor mount plate to the mandrel motor. Okay, the motor mount plate is attached to the mandrel motor with the 4 5mm button head screws. Let's pull off the shaft covering. Notice there is a keyway in the key slot. We will simply remove the keyway from the key slot. We don't need that. This is a 12mm shaft. We're now going to take our mandrel motor gear and slide it down onto the shaft. Notice that I will align the hex screws so that they do not impinge upon the key slot. And you'll want to get the mandrel gear right up close to the face of the mandrel motor. Let's tighten that down with the hex keys provided. There's one. There's 2. I'll clamp it down, tighten that up a bit. Tighten this one up a bit. Okay. Now, I'm going to go ahead and remove the left mandrel post from the forward long bar so that we can have a better, now watch, just removing it is just simply in reverse. It'll just slide right off. Let's set our front long bar to the side. Okay, so there's our double T-nut. The mandrel motor matches up right with the double T-nut. And let's get some button head screws to assign that with. Okay, a couple of button head screws, and notice the shape of the mandrel motor plate, that the bottom protrusion or arc is on the downside, not on the upside. That's important, and when we put the belt on, you'll see that that'll give us some extra. So I'm going to take the button head screw and loosely, let's position the double end nut a little bit better there. So I'm just going to loosely engage the screw threads with the threads of the double T-nut. So that one, okay. Okay, now notice the mandrel motor can move up and down on the left mandrel post. Let's go get our belt. Okay, here is our mandrel motor drive belt. I'm going to slide that up. Now notice what I can do is I have tensioning ability of the motor and the motor belt, so I'm going to hold it firm and get fairly decent tension and then tighten down on the button head screws that affix the mandrel motor mount plate to the left mandrel post. And there you go. Now let's bring in our long bar back again, our forward long bar. Slide the concealed end nuts into the long bar. From the top again, you can actually see the threads, the button head cap through. Now I'm going to tighten that down and tighten this one down. And there you have it, your left mandrel post assembly.